So apparently I missed that this happened yesterday, but Liberal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, or soon to not be the Finance Minister of Mark Carney, ends up entering the cabinet. She lashed out at Conservatives in question period and is just for some reason deciding that for political gain to undermine Canada's trade relationship with the United States. I'm going to get into a little bit more on how she did that, but as a general rule, don't attack the neighboring country's potential future president when you're dealing with your opposition. Like, I know other parties tend to ask slightly snarky questions to the current government whenever they ask about the economy or security or whatever. That's par for the course. Question period is frankly very dull, even at its most spicy. And so when the Conservatives are jabbing at the Liberals, well, one, they should attempt to answer the questions, but I'm not expecting them to do that because they've been not doing that for 8 straight years. But they should at least pretend that they're willing to answer some questions. They should at least, pivot, be cordial and polite. But the Liberals decide to sideswipe Donald Trump and the Republicans and are going after the Conservatives as Maple MAGA. But first, let's just sort of get into the preamble of what happens first, the exchange that Poilievre and Freeland had in English before Freeland freaked out at a question from Melissa Lantsman about the very fraudulent way that the Liberals are trying to cast the, improving Canadian economy. It's not improving. We have slight positive movement when it comes to wages, and inflation has come down in terms of its rate. Still going up, but the government likes to pretend, oh, wow, inflation's down. And they don't tell you that, no, inflation's still going up, as it usually does. It's just not going up as fast. But that doesn't really help anyone who still hasn't caught up to where they used to be at financially like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Anyway, so here is the first exchange between Pierre Poilievre and Chrystia Freeland.
Opposition.
Canadians in the former Liberal strongholds of Toronto and Montreal have now given their verdict. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Taxes up, costs up, crime's up, time's up. Mr. Speaker, isn't it time for Canadians to have a chance to render their verdict right across the country, electing a common sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
Before we get into Freeland's answer here, this sounds like a very strange non sequitur, but I do have to compliment the fact that Poilievre has gotten a much better haircut than he used to have. Before, when he took the glasses off, I always found that his face and haircut didn't look like they matched up. Now they do. That's the weirdest comment I'm ever going to make for this week about somebody's appearance, but that's just something I noticed. His haircut has somehow gotten much better.
I ask members, especially members on the far side of the House, to please not to take the microphone until they're recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about the economy. That is because today we had good news for Canadians. Inflation is back down to where it was before COVID hit. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range this whole year. Wages have outpaced inflation for 19 months in a row. But
they actually have not. They haven't. It's this weaselly way of presenting inflation as, oh, wow, well, finally Canadians are outpacing inflation. They're not. They're outpacing inflation if their wage increase was only up against this year's inflation. So your wages went up 2.7% and inflation only went up 2.3%. Oh, you've outpaced inflation. But that's not counting the fact that we had basically zero wage growth during COVID between 2020 and 2023. And so we were stuck with 7, 8, 9% inflation in some years. And we were not growing in terms of income at all. So when your wages are going up, you're not outpacing inflation. You're outpacing inflation if we artificially only consider inflation having started now. The 2% inflation, it's a little bit more than 2%, but they're just generalizing. The inflation is still on top of everything that came before it. People are still worse off than they are today, and they're being talked down to this by this lady who pretends like her family deciding to cancel Disney Plus was like showing that she has solidarity with the middle class and all the economic hardships they're going through. Like everything about her screams substitute teacher talking down to 7-year-olds.
But the Conservatives don't want to talk about it. They are so weak and spiteful that for them, good news for Canadians is bad news they want to ignore.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this incompetent finance minister would tell you that you should celebrate that after prices rising faster than at any time in 40 years, they continue to rise, just not as quickly. I'm sure the people living in tent encampments, or the record-smashing 2 million people lined up at food banks, or the 1 in 4 kids going to school hungry after 9 years of this government will be celebrating. But what we now find out is that it's worse than we thought. According to a document just released, the government's second carbon tax will cost $9 billion in lost GDP. Why won't we have a carbon tax election to decide?
So he made the exact point I was going to make, that, yeah, I hate whenever people pretend like getting the inflation rate down is a win when we have not actually gotten the raw inflation under control from the past few years. We actually probably need an inflation rate of -2 for a couple of years if we actually want people to be back at where they were in 2019. And they weren't in such a hot place in 2019 either, if anyone can remember. The economy was already slumping in 2019, but falling back into the sophomore slump we are in 2019 is considered like us rocketing towards the moon in terms of prosperity, because simply of how bad the economy was in 2022 and 23, that now we're back to 2019 levels. It's like, oh, wow, isn't everything so good? No, not really.
The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all know why the Conservatives are so panicked about an election. It's because they can see that the economic news is good.
Apparently, people didn't hear about it in Montreal or Toronto. And she could say, well, the Bank of Canada hadn't announced the news yet. Well, people can usually feel the economy getting better. And you lost in Toronto St. Paul, and you lost in LaSalle-Verdun because people don't actually think you're better off. That's the thing. Is I always hate whenever people cite, you get hacky lefty people in the media saying, well, actually, if you take this study or whatever, it actually says people are benefiting more from the carbon tax than it's being taken away from them from the rebate. It's like, no, they're not. Do you know how we know they're not? Because they tell you they're not. And then people aren't under the false impression that they got more taken away, even though that's not reality. They know they're worse off because they feel worse off. And the feeling, like, it's not artificial. Nobody's convinced them that the carbon tax was hurting them more. They were hurting more. So when Poilievre suggested it was hurting them more, people were like, yeah, it is. It wasn't like and this is really just the way the left pretends, like, oh, if you actually believe anything conservative, it's because you've been lied to. And so they can never be wrong. It's either that they're right or like either voters like them because the voters know how well they're doing, how good the Liberals are. And if they don't vote Liberal, it's because they've been lied to. And, all this other Noam Chomsky-ish crap of like, what is it, manufactured consent.
Can see that we are now back to exactly where we were before COVID hit. They can see the Bank of Canada has lowered interest rates 3 times in a row, and wages have been ahead of inflation for 19 months. That's good news for Canadians. It's bad news for Conservatives.
Yeah, I can see the struggling family just gathering around the television. Some mother says, everyone, get in the room, kids. The Bank of Canada is about to make an announcement about the inflation rate this year. Oh wow! Look, we've been able to reduce the interest rates by 3 different times. Wow, inflation this year is only 2%. Wow, like nobody thinks this way, but this is the way that Liberals and like the CBC, like CTV Global, especially very lefty papers like the Toronto Star, the Tyee, the National Observer. This is how they want you to think about the economy. They want you to think about the economy as just a macro project. So, hey, look, the GDP went up this year. Wow, Yes, because we added 500,000 new people to the population. Even if every single one of those people only had $100 to their name, technically the GDP went up because we all added, 500,000 times 100 to the economy in terms of GDP because they all had money on them. That's not actually how an economy grows. Our per capita, like GDP, is going down for a reason. And she's saying, oh, wages have gone up. How is our per capita GDP going down then? I know that they're basically just taking a shopping basket of different careers and wage jobs and showing that on average, certain people in those industries are being paid more. But as an overall picture of the economy, people are not making more money unless you're willing to be lied to in this way about like small gains being like the representative of the whole economy. But now let's get over to Melissa Lantsman going after the deputy prime minister and finance minister, because I thought this was pretty great that the Conservatives have gotten this much under the skin of the Liberals. I just had to quickly jump ahead because for some reason we needed to hear from Blanchette and Singh before it got back to Melissa Lantsman here.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
It's day 2 in the House as the first female finance minister, again, is being publicly humiliated by the fake feminist prime minister. What's worse is that she's being replaced by an unelected man outside of her own caucus who her boss is now shielding from conflict of interest laws that allow him to take her job and keep his money. A man who works against our resource sector, who exports jobs to China while championing higher carbon taxes on heating and eating for Canadians. Why won't the finance minister talk to her boss about ending the personal attacks on her own credibility?
I do love the kind of babying of Chrystia Freeland here, that Melissa Lantsman is standing up for the honor of Chrystia Freeland and pretending like, we're helping you, Chrystia. We want you to be able to do your job better. And isn't it unfair that Trudeau is basically sidelining you? And this is exactly why Mark Carney couldn't take over for Trudeau. I don't think Mark Carney performs any better than Trudeau does as prime minister in terms of popularity. I think Mark Carney would make a better prime minister, but we're really splitting hairs here in terms of like what we consider better. Like, it wouldn't be good, but it would just be slightly better than Trudeau. But there's so many attack vectors on Mark Carney. That's why the Conservatives, even before Mark Carney has kind of officially slid in as like the shadow, the phantom kind of finance minister, they're already able to like kick him to death in question period over the fact that he is a big money, like central bank elitist who has made people's lives worse in the name of failed Keynesian economics and demand side fiscal stimulus plans that just end up like spiking inflation. But it's great for like the economy overall. No, I was going to say big business, not even that. It's good for certain ones. It's good for whatever state subsidized businesses exist. It's corporatism effectively. But now here's Chrystia Freeland, not able to handle herself, and she's going to go into her Maple MAGA comedy bit.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about feminism because I know what a feminist government looks like.
Apparently, a feminist government votes in favor of sex-selective abortion, but whatever.
A feminist government builds the first national system of early learning and childcare. A feminist government makes contraceptives free. And a feminist government ensures that every single woman in Canada has full control over her body.
Can I again remind you guys, this government voted against upgraded sentencing that the Conservatives proposed for criminals who murder pregnant women. They don't actually care about women at all. They just care about getting women to vote for them. So they won't actually protect women when it's a bill that they think people won't care about. Only when it's like public will they kind of make a big hoopla about that we're voting with women. It's like they're not. They actually don't respect women at all. And it has nothing to do with whether you're like a feminist or not, or if you're a woman and you care about other strong women. Honestly, that's the most nauseating thing ever when there's like a woman in politics who talks about other strong women. Like, it's very rehearsed all the time. But they don't actually care about women at all. They make more women go to food banks than ever before. They're basically making more women have to go to work than ever before to be able to pay rent for their family. And that's why they need the childcare. They need the $10 a day childcare that doesn't even really work. because more women are forced to work full-time jobs because their family can't afford groceries and their mortgage. Disgusting.
Stand up for that. They have no right to talk.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Fake feminist prime minister throws his finance minister under the bus with all the other ministers. The real record of this finance minister is record smashing, 1 million people visiting a food bank in her province. In Ontario, 1 in 4 Canadians living in poverty. Canadians now spend more in taxes than they do on housing, on food, and on clothes combined. No wonder they're putting the training wheels back on for her. She can tell that to the prime minister.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I've stood up to Trump, and I have stood up to Putin. Juvenile, flagrant insults from the wannabe MAGA maple syrup conservatives do not frighten me at all. But what I think is really interesting is that they don't actually want to talk about the economy. And that's because good economic news for Canadians is bad news for them. How pathetic that they put their own partisan interest first.
Pathetic partisan interests. Can I remind Chrystia Freeland? I know that she is so partisan, she probably didn't even notice what she did there. Donald Trump and the Republicans are more likely than the Democrats to be in power after January of next year. Do I have to explain why that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life? One, what are you talking about? Like, I think that at this point, people would actually, in Canada, vote for Trump before they'd vote for Trudeau, because Trump would lower people's taxes and stop literally stepping all over people when it comes to their own, like, their free speech rights, autonomy, and all this stuff. But like Chrystia Freeland, one, this is just like out of complete left field. This wasn't even left field. This was like from like the other side of the planet. She comes and starts like screaming about Maple MAGA. I've stood up to Putin or whatever. Like, yeah, I guarantee Putin, before he decided to invade Ukraine, was thinking, "Oh my goodness, what's Chrystia Freeland gonna say about this?" But and like he's like, "Oh, I've stood up to Trump." You failed at the last trade negotiations, and now when Trump's president, do you think he's going to respect you more now when he gets to see clips of you basically attacking your opposition as terrible and evil because they're like him? You're an idiot. Thanks for helping hurt Canada. People are suffering now. It's going to be worse when we potentially have tariffs put on our products because the Canadian government are being snarky idiots before we actually open trade negotiations. If I was running for office or I was a politician, guess what? Do you know what you talk about? Do you know what you say about the United States? Nothing but nice things. And it's not because we're scared of them for imperialistic reasons. Oh, the Americans are going to come crush us, so we have to grovel. No. You don't for not necessarily antagonize politicians in another country unless they're actual national security threats or enemies. You don't do that. And the U.S. is the definition of an ally. What's wrong with you? You don't hit Biden. You don't hit Trump. You don't even hit a former president. You don't even say anything about Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton. Say nothing. Say nothing. Just focus on our economy and making sure our relationship with the United States is impeccable. This actually helped the Conservatives probably a lot. You're going to get a lot of moderate voters in Canada who might not even be saying they're voting Conservative yet, or maybe they're soft Conservatives, who are definitely going to vote Conservative because Chrystia Freeland and these morons are putting our actual trade at risk with the United States by just randomly just sideswiping the Republicans and kicking like Trump in the face for no reason. Why do this ever? It's so stupid. I thought the Liberals stopped doing this after a while because I didn't think that they thought Trump was going to be like a contender for president again. And then they suddenly were talking about the MAGA conservatives and all this stuff. And, oh, they're far right, alt-right MAGA, something, double secret probation conservatives. And then suddenly they stopped because Trump was leading in the polls over Biden. And now I guess because like Kamala Harris has a 40% chance of winning, at least according to Nate Silver, now they feel confident enough again to start attacking. Stop it. What are you guys doing? Like, I'm a conservative. I want the conservatives to win. Now I need the conservatives to win even harder because I don't want our economy to do badly under the Liberals' terrible negotiation teams over trade. My goodness. Again, Freeland got her lunch eaten by like Trump's negotiators during the trade talks. They gave up so much. The US had a lot of Canadian industries remove tariffs, and the US didn't really remove the same amount of tariffs. I wish we didn't really have too many tariffs between the two countries. It would make things cheaper for everybody. But like Chrystia Freeland fell on her face during those negotiations. Even she was embarrassed after the fact. There's a lot of stories that were leaked about just how poor she was at negotiations, where like they would like make her proposal and then they would come back and beg like a lot. It was horrible. Anyways, these people suck at their jobs. I'm not sure if I can say anything else about it. Like, share, and subscribe for the channel. Comment, do all that nice stuff. It's bad out there. It's really bad. See you guys later.